The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
You and I have talked about this before, but the system being clogged and all, one of the ideas that I've always had in the back of my mind is that judges that sit on the bench, like before they do anything on the bench, should go through a weekend at county jail. And you had mentioned that law enforcement should do it as well. And I think I agree with that.
I think that everybody should experience a small amount of what they're doling out. And the reason for that is it's almost like so they'll take it seriously, right?
That I'm not thinking it's the punitive measure. I think that's the only way you understand what you're doing.
Right. And it's not that I would say necessarily, judges and law enforcement don't take things seriously. I just think that you get like a whole new perspective when you experience it.
Think of all the industries. I've worked in several different industries over the years. You don't start at the top. And like
you learn the
prosecutors, judges, law enforcement are technically at the top. Everything else requires you to be a production assistant or to come in as a customer service rep or whatever. You come in, you work that role up so that you understand the machine that you're working within.
That's interesting because I've always looked at prosecutors, law enforcement, judges as the other side as opposed to a hierarchy. But you're right, though.
Power and resources wise, we've unfortunately got to a point. I was watching, I think North Carolina just passed a budget. There was another state that was the last holdout to pass a budget, and they were all padding these law enforcement raises. And nothing personal if you happen to be in law enforcement, you don't need another raise. But the idea is that you use the experience you have in law enforcement to get a better job. You don't need to be sitting in a government job making six figures as a patrol officer. And I think one of the North Carolina things I saw was their ALE agents were getting a 20% raise, and their ALE from this could be 10 episodes about
what does ALE stand for?
The Alcohol Law Enforcement in North Carolina.
Okay.
It's basically the place where all the cops who can't get jobs in other places because they've done something problematic go. Mm-hmm. And they frequently have scandals. Like first of all, they barely are an agency, but they have special agents there who have all the powers of other special agents like the SBI and.
Somebody made this up, didn't they?
What, ALE?
Yeah.
Yeah, they made it up there. And I brought up North Carolina because, one, they were the last state of the 50 to pass a budget. But two, because the ALE sticks in my craw a little bit because they have that whole ABC program there. They don't have normal liquor stores and normal
the alcoholic beverage
control, I think.
Control, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically that means in North Carolina, to get liquor, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's by content or something. You have to go to an ABC store.
Correct. They can't sell it elsewhere except restaurants and ABC stores.
Right. And in restaurants, you're ordering drinks, right? As opposed to getting a bottle of it, I think. Well, you can get but wine and beer and that kind of thing can be sold in grocery stores, right?
Right. And do you remember a time when certain places you couldn't sell it on Sunday?
Yes, I do remember that. Is that still a thing?
I don't know. I was thinking about that the other day.
So I know that it used to not be sold on Sunday, and then they switched it to not being able to sell it like until after 11 or something on Sundays. And all of that was so stupid.
We recently were talking in like the New Jersey side of things for me. We were talking about inheriting liquor licenses. Do you know how all that works? Like people wait years to get a liquor license, and,
right.
And the state only issues so many. So one of the things that's gone on in our family over the years is like running different family members, but like all together, like catering events and then having an event space and then running floral and doing all of the things for an event. And part of that involved having a liquor license.
Mm-hmm.
So the liquor license is really what you're selling when you sell the business.
That's
because
interesting.
They can't get it elsewhere.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that is like bureaucracy at its finest or worst, I guess, depending on how you're classifying it. Usually all the wrong things go into who is getting a liquor license, right?
They do. And like, there's so much grease on the wheels in New Jersey in terms of.
I think it's everywhere though.
It is. That's like
what you've experienced.
Right. That's what I can see. We have this whole host of things happening, law enforcement, prosecution wise, like they're not as separated in these places that we're talking about, like to the point that I'm trying to find another word than industry, but they are an industry. And
the state executive and judicial branches, they run their own economy.
They do, really. And that's sort of why I was thinking that prosecutors and judges are at the top of the hierarchy, because they have so many resources.
Yeah, you're right. I had just never thought of it that way before. I just see it as like citizens versus the state. But I also like, and I've had to hold on to this because of life, I guess. It's crazy. If I had told myself 20 years ago, that I was going to have to hold on to this viewpoint, like the citizens are in charge of the state, right? As much as the officials don't understand that, tax-paying citizens, we make the state be able to be an entity, right? And it's amazing when, I don't even know what a good example would be, but like, I'm not intimidated by judges or prosecutors or law enforcement in theory. Okay. Now that's not to say that, I wouldn't be intimidated by a circumstance that happened. Right. But I'm saying that in theory, we want those people in place to do the job that the citizens need done, right?
Right, but we have to maintain the position of being their bosses.
Well, right, and that's where, like, your example of, liquor license in New Jersey, that's tolerated, right?
Yep.
And it's more nuanced than just like, oh, we tolerate it. But, however it's structured out, somebody was elected and somebody was appointed and, they've allowed this to occur. And it would probably be really hard to unravel, but it could be done, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like parts of the system have to be kind of dismantled at this point. And I was trying to think of a stopgap, and that is everybody who's on the bench, everybody who's a prosecutor. You can skip law enforcement for the moment, because I think law enforcement in our country needs to be significantly downgraded. They do not need like military type equipment and training. They need like more training on the sort of like a counselor or a psychologist.
Community policing.
Yeah, community policing is a huge deal. That's for me personally, and that's because that's really the only way that you weed out all the problematic police. And the rotten apple,
spoiling the whole bunch.
Yeah, that is particularly true in policing, and I had to learn to talk to judges over the years because, like, I can remember a time in the 90s where I did not know how to talk to judges. And then I can remember a time after that where I had to learn to talk to them on my own behalf because, like, I remember standing up and talking in situations that I had to defend myself or had to state my argument where I just sounded like I was rambling on. And, like, it took me a really long time to get used to doing that. And it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to walk in and talk to any judges, any prosecutors. Like,
well, right. We elect them.
Right. We should be able to talk to them and just have a totally normal conversation with them. It should not be the level of nonsense it's become. And I bring all of this up because we have multiple things that we're talking about. You and I have been following certain cases as we put these stories together. For instance, like, we have never figured out what to do with the Holly Bobo case. Like, we have, I have probably single-handedly consumed more material about that case. Like, it's definitely in the top 5. I think it's in the top 3 of all the things I've ever, like, tried to do. I've read every court document. I've listened to every trial transcript and every appellate hearing.
Right. And I avoided it like the plague.
Yeah, we knew from the jump, and I think we stated this a long time ago. We kind of kiddingly point out in the season 1 of this show that, like, there's, like, similarities between what Israel Keys did and what happened to Holly Bobo.
Right,
and
the squatting down where they were, yeah.
Right. We had this whole, like, crazy thing. We could never put him there. Never made sense in time.
Yeah, it was not Israel Keys. Definitely not.
But what it did reveal to the two of us in terms of our thinking was that it was a lone wolf type crime and that none of the lone wolf scenario played out in court.
Well, right. And I've noticed, like, in general, if it's not a lone wolf situation, there's going to be a dominant character that gives that you're going to find out. I'm just saying only one person can keep a secret, right?
Yeah.
It's never going to be a situation where in the right circumstances, they're not going to give it. And it might be the wrong one that gives up the situation and blames the other one. I'm not saying that it always is the right person coming forward. However, I think we overestimate people's ability to commiserate with a co-defendant. The evil is just not there. And
are you talking about this case specifically or in general?
And I'm talking about in general. The evil of doing these horrific, especially these horrific crimes. I'm not saying that, like, some people can't, as a group go and get into some trouble. But for example, in Holly Bobo's case, the fact that, like, they've got this 4-guy team is so stupid.
With no leader, no capable leader, and, like, the way that the state presents the case, we find out much, much later. Like, I think it was last fall, you and I were listening to hearings
about
on this.
Yeah.
We're listening to these people, and we realize that, like, even the prosecutor in that case for the Zach Adams part of it, because of the way it all goes down, that's the main section of the trial we have.
That's the only trial we have.
Right. And I just meant there's all this, like, appellate stuff from that. But the trial that we watched initially is Zach Adams, and it tells the story of all the defendants. And that prosecutor is now a judge. And she does not have any idea. Like, she needed a month in county jail to understand her job. And even then, I don't know if she would have got it.
I don't know that would have helped. She's very far removed from what she's doing. And I was very embarrassed for her during the trial when she, especially, like, I think she did the closing, and then I was sort of embarrassed for myself because I was like, well, I apparently am the only one who sees this. I wasn't sure, and I didn't watch the trial till much, much later.
Right. Because it's all available online if people want to get into that one.
Well, I just couldn't. I can't even explain what happened with the Holly Bobo case for me personally, as far as going, like, I tuned you out every single time because I'm like, yeah, I'm not going down that pathway. And I don't know why, because it's an atrocious case, right?
Right.
It's one of the most evil and brutal things that could happen to any human being. And if you think about it, I realize that for some reason, it's sort of like, oh, people go missing all the time and all this stuff. Okay, well, yes, people, are missing, but they don't get kidnapped.
Not that way, no.
From, between their house and their carport. And it's not a normal case. The brutality is unbelievable, right?
Yeah, if you even take away the victim part of it, because honestly, the type of victim and like what's going on in her world and where she lives is what keeps her on the front page as long as she's on there, because she's still missing for that period of time. But if you remove her from the scenario, it is still a brutally evil crime for someone to be abducted like that, to go missing, and then like only like a little bit of like parts of her, which like her remains aren't recovered entirely, and we end up, I say that part because we end up with this like crazy rape murder trial where we don't even know anything about the rape part.
No, we don't. The only thing that they have basically is Jason Aldry's testimony. Right,
which is a different problem, and I guess he's just going to be in prison forever now, because he got out. On this case, he got time served for like a sort of a BS charge if his story is true. But ultimately, we end up finding out that, like, I mean, I say finding out, but I knew all along, like, his story didn't make any sense. It didn't fit, like, even the state's narrative.
His story is fiction.
Right.
Based on the evidence, right?
Right.
And it is disastrous to the extent that the attorneys, his defense attorneys, like, wrote it. And
right. From the state's evidence.
From the state, because they wanted, so the defense attorney stepping in and saying, okay, we need to, you're our client. We need to get the best outcome for you. I do not think that you're supposed to go to these extremes. I'm not sure why there wasn't more of a... I get that it's an adversarial system, but it's not supposed to be this extreme.
Right. Like, so overall, and this should disturb people, this case, in terms of how it rolls through the system while described in all these horrific ways, and the case itself is horrific because it's the loss of a young life. It's an overwhelmingly average situation. You don't have any super evil, corrupt prosecutors or super ineffective defense counsel or these defendants that have committed all these serial crimes. It's an overwhelmingly average case. And the prosecution to this day will tell you, I delivered justice to the Bobo family. And that's just not what happened. So
I don't even see how she thinks that is what she did, honestly. Nobody has ever been able to say even, like, what was Zach Adams, what were the actions he took that ended up having him be in jail, right? Nobody can explain a narrative that makes sense.
Right. And see, I think that sentence is the problem with it. When you don't know what happened, the story that you make up is okay.
And that's just not true, right?
Right. That is 100% not true. It just happens that it affects that case like way more than other cases because of the spotlight that was shown on it.
And after I pulled my head out of the sand, because like I said, I avoided it like the plague. I was like, not today, Satan, every time you brought it up. And after I pulled my head out of the sand, I have gone to some like personal extremes trying to figure out like, what could we do to make light of this, make it where, because to me, this is it, how it sits is the most not justice it could ever be. It's an injustice, right? How it sits right now. And I just don't have a good answer.
Yeah. So the reason I brought that up is because we're going to be talking about a bunch of interesting court rulings, but we're not going to be talking about a court ruling in the Zach Adams case. Because for those of you who don't know, in 2025, there were a series of hearings. They weren't held in a like cohesive fashion because they were parts. So it's kind of like in Law and Order, like the thing that you're not realizing if you're not watching the dates at the bottom of the screen is like most of that stuff, while it spills out in an hour, took place over a year. Like if you watch the dates and what part it is in court.
Right.
So the Holly Bobo trial itself and then the appeals and the efforts have taken place over 10 years. So this section last year is supposed to have resulted in a ruling by now. I know at least one listener texts me about this frequently. We have a former guest who every time I speak with her, she mentions that there's no ruling yet. And I know you and I have talked about it, like, because I think sometime last week you texted me, you were like, why is there no ruling in the Zach Adams thing?
Well, right. And so it's very specific by the law, which I have no doubt that his attorney is all over this if it has in fact breached the deadline. But it's very specific in the law that the judge had, like, I think it's 60 days with the possibility of having a one-time extension of an additional 30 days. So that would make it 90 days. And I remember when the judge got the case, essentially, I think it was, does Zach Adams need a new trial because evidence was withheld, right?
Right.
The picture of that's essentially and so everything's presented to the judge and the judge has to decide. And when he got the case, he said, I'm going to tell you right now, you can count on the extension. Right? That's what he said.
Yeah. And so we realized there was going to be a massive amount of information is what he was getting at back then.
Right. And there could be a way in the like calculation of the timing, because that can get really confusing sometimes. You don't count weekends, or if it's this many weeks or that many weeks, you count it a different way. So I could be off, but I know 90 days has passed.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it.
We're past it, even including like the holiday times that come up in the end of the year and the early part of the year. We're definitely past it, but there's always a possibility that all parties have agreed behind the scenes that they're extending the deadline.
What does that tell you? I don't have a problem with this judge. Okay. So I don't want to like bust his chops too badly, but what does it tell you when like the law is the judge has to come back with the opinion and the ruling in a certain amount of time? And then like, even, if they all agreed to it, he still didn't do that. I find that disheartening.
I think this is an incredibly complex set of circumstances when you sit down and realize how jacked up it is.
Well, and I'm kind of hoping the judge sees that.
I don't have any opinion on the judge yet. I wanted to see some kind of ruling. I felt like he handled the proceedings appropriately.
Yeah, he was very fair, and he was listening. He was definitely listening. So that was good, because he was going to be the finder of fact in this particular leg of the trial, right?
Correct.
But in the meantime, I'm very cognizant of the fact that, Zach Adams has been sitting in jail or prison, I guess. I don't know where he's at currently.
It's a mixture of the two, mostly prison at this point, because it's been so long.
And so ultimately, I don't know why I was so repelled by this. I think it was just because it was a young girl, and it was truly just an unimaginable case as far as what happened to her. And I just blocked it out. But we have seen through all the different proceedings that there's absolutely no question in my mind that the 4 accused of the Holly Bobo murder, and 2 with the plea agreements of guilty, 1 committing suicide, and Zach Adams being found guilty, those 4 men couldn't organize a 4-person parade.
Correct.
Much less turn around and have this very complicated kidnapping, abduction, murder, a rape, murder. It is insane that was ever even presented to anybody, because it makes no sense.
Yeah, this whole thing, everything that went on here, it has exposed a lot of interesting mechanisms that I knew to be true, but didn't know how to articulate them. And one of those was just when there's disagreements between agencies and so interagency disagreements, but then also disagreements within the agency itself, intra-agency disagreements, you can have a serious disaster that not only do you not get justice for the state's witness or the original victim. In this case, it's a decedent, so someone's lost their life. You also, their families don't get justice. The defendants end up not getting justice, and all the defendants' families end up not getting justice.
Well, and one of the things that is always in the back of my mind is Holly Bobo's family thinks they got justice, right?
Right.
And I can't even begin to I don't understand why. I feel like maybe they've got blinders on, right? To some extent, and that's why they've accepted it or whatever. But, there was a whole thing where Holly's mom, she chastised Zach Adams from the stand, and I understood her. Why I wouldn't say that I could understand her grief, but I didn't fault her for what she was doing. It was just sort of how can you not see what's happening here, right?
Right.
And that made me really sad. And I've thought about that. I've thought about Clint Bobo, and I've wondered, well, do they really wonder, are they set on this? Because part of my thoughts on, what can we possibly do to expose this, it includes thinking about them and how this would affect them, right?
Right.
So I'm waiting for the opinion. I find it just crazy that it has possibly exceeded the deadline. I don't know what that means for whatever's happening. It doesn't really matter, I don't guess, because in the event, what do you do if they don't meet the deadline? You still don't have an opinion, right? It's not like you can do anything.
Yeah, I am just waiting on that one. And I brought it up because, the next 3 things I'm going to talk about are kind of in a different place. One of them is far before this. It's early on. It's literally a filing and something that we talked about. But the other 2 arrived in some interesting places. I don't have anything else on Holly Bobo right this second. I don't have anything else on Zach Adams right this second. I'm just like pointing out that like you and I follow these things, and like I could almost make a calendar out of everything we're following and what we're trying to do with it.
There's a calendar in my brain.
But do you have anything else on them right now?
No, I'm just waiting on the opinion. I am trying to be patient, though. I did text you last week or whenever, but I'm not searching for it. I'm not trying to, like, I know it's coming or it's supposed to be coming, and I'm just waiting.
Well, the other person that's texting with me is less patient about it, so that's why I brought it up today. The first phase of the other type of things that are going on in court cases that we've covered or talked about, depending on where we fall. Did you see the Brendan Banfield defense team filing to have the guilty verdict set aside?
Indeed, I did.
So for those of you who don't know, you should be following the Brendan Banfield trial. You should go back and watch the whole trial. It is all available online.
Well, I was going to say he's been convicted, so it's almost like it could be past tense, right?
Correct.
Except it's not.
Right. So we get this early May filing where they're trying to... So he's facing a mandatory life sentence. He was found guilty of the murder of his wife and the murder of a completely innocent person that for some reason he decided, along with his au pair, Juliana Perez Malgaliz, that they were going to skip divorce in terms of Brendan Banfield and his wife, and they were going to not only murder her, but murder her in this bizarre fashion where they were having a conversation with this person off a website over a fetish called CNC, which is consent not consent, where they wanted it to look like this really horrific rape scene between this guy and Brendan Banfield's wife, and it doesn't go that way. Meg and I found out by listening to the trial that, like, apparently Christine Banfield was very much alive as this was happening, and thought that her husband would clearly save her from this intruder in her home. Turns out to really be someone who thinks he's having a consensual encounter with her. The trial is pretty horrific. We've watched hours of it and listened to hours of like other information about this. But the bottom line is his defense is now saying we would like there to be a set aside on the verdict, which means they're going to immediately go to appeal because he's facing this life sentence, but I don't think we have an official sentencing hearing yet, right? It was postponed because of this. Because of the
appeal, right?
Yeah.
It was, I believe, when he was convicted, I believe they set a date. That was, sometime probably around now. But again, that would be postponed, or an abeyance would be whatever. To have a hearing on, is it a motion?
It's a motion to set aside. And so they're saying that 3 errors were committed in the trial that were preserved. And I think they're worried that maybe they didn't preserve them enough for the appeal. And I don't totally understand everything in Virginia. So this may be the only time they can do this, and that's why they're doing it. But there's 3 reasons or 3 errors that the defense attorney, John Carroll, is saying, look, you've got to look at this before sentencing. So the first one was basically they're saying this whole proceeding was a violation of Brendan Banfield's 5th and 14th Amendment rights. And like they're saying that his silence to the investigators along the way as his case unfolded was used against him by the state, which may or may not be a thing.
It may or may not be a thing, except that he testified.
He did, but the Commonwealth's attorney, I noticed in their response, they admitted to this. And they admitted to asking him why he never gave his account of events to investigators until he got on the stand. But the state's position, through Jenna Sands, who's the deputy Commonwealth attorney involved in this, is that that doesn't violate his 5th or 14th Amendment rights. So there's not a lot going on with the first error they say is committed. It's really like, does the appeals court think yay or nay? Does the judge think yay or nay?
You have the right to remain silent, but once you're going to talk, then you can, like, she could ask him things like that, no?
Ultimately, I think the way this would work was, like, I think once you give up the 5th Amendment right, you have to reassert it. That sounds like crazy, but I think that's really what we would be dealing with here, and I don't think that... it's such a weird technical thing on that.
Well, right, but keeping in mind, like, I don't know that you can half testify and then reassert your 5th Amendment right.
But the idea is you can testify but not answer questions that tend to incriminate you.
Well, yeah, that's that'd be pleading the 5th.
I think the defense is reaching with that first one. I can't see a scenario where it makes sense for that to be the thing they like set aside the verdict on. I'm sure the court can prove me wrong.
If he hadn't have testified, it would be different. I do know that there's case opinions that that talk about, you know, not holding silence against a defendant. So I think that he's just I think his attorney has merged two concepts here.
I've been wondering if they're setting up an ineffective assistance of counsel kind of thing here, because like sometimes that happens, and it's not. I don't
know that it needs to be set up.
But I think I was getting ready to say I think we're already there. I was kind of disappointed with the defense counsel in this case, and I think he would have done better with the public defenders up there, the Virginia defenders.
The defense counsel was trying very hard. I could see. I don't necessarily think. I'm not saying he shouldn't plead that, but I don't necessarily think he had ineffective assistance of counsel. I think that his attorney went to bat for him in ways that I know a lot of defense attorneys would not have. So,
see, I felt like maybe that was bad in this case because I feel like some of. That's the first thing that they're arguing, and obviously John Carroll is making that argument here. I think maybe later on this is going to come back in a different way, and that's why they're setting all of this up. But I could be overthinking what they're doing. The second way that they're saying this verdict should be set aside because there's an egregious error is because they're saying the prosecution called a last-minute surprise witness during the trial. According to John Carroll, he believes in this filing that violated Brendan Banfield's right to the exclusion of witnesses. The rule on witnesses' order prohibits any witnesses from watching coverage of the trial. That's a scenario that like kind of technically plays out a little differently. The idea is if you're going to be testifying, for the most part, I think there's generally an exclusion for the lead investigator, because they sit through all of it anyways.
Right.
But for the most part, the idea is you can't sit in the front row and listen to everyone else and tailor your testimony to combat or support the testimony of any other witness.
Which is funny because typically expert witnesses are allowed to sit because they've got to know what's been testified to so that they can have something to say about it.
Yeah, it varies in terms of which witnesses in which jurisdictions can sit where. But sequestration is what they're talking about here. They're ultimately saying that during the prosecution's rebuttal, they call this guy Thomas Patrick Smith to the stand. The whole reason Thomas Patrick Smith gets involved is because he heard Brendan Banfield's testimony. So John Carroll writes that learning of the testimony from watching on television, I think he actually said YouTube, but either way, the way the deputy attorney general or deputy state's attorney, Commonwealth's attorney, sorry, so many different terms. The way they combat this is they say there's nothing specific in the testimony that Thomas Patrick Smith could have been combating something. I don't know what this argument is about. It felt kind of weird. Do you remember him coming on to testify?
Yes, and his testimony was that Brendan Banfield's testimony that there was a big meeting was not true. Really, it's sort of like the chicken and the egg, because like, how could they prepare for, because that's literally all he had to say is basically, I can testify that he did not have a big meeting that day.
Right.
And without him having testified in court, like, he hadn't given a side of the story yet, so it's not like they could know that, right?
Right. And that's what I don't understand. So they bring him in as a rebuttal witness, which means after everyone has testified for the defense, the prosecution is allowed to rebut things that they're saying are false. Generally, it's like to impeach someone or to correct the record, or because of certain testimony, something arises that needs to be addressed by the state's case. I don't think that gets us anywhere on the Brendan Banfield side of things. But I don't know how a judge would look at that. And then there's the third thing, which I actually kind of agree with, but like I don't think it means what the defense attorney thinks it means. John Carroll says the last error is that the prosecution did not knowingly correct false testimony. So Juliana Perez Malgaliz, she comes in and clearly has taken a plea deal. She is testifying against Brendan Banfield because of this plea deal. But then she gets on the stand, and like some of her testimony is so interesting, but like she largely checks out for a big part of it. I think you described it as you could see her kind of thinking in English, thinking in Portuguese, trying to figure out how to respond.
There was a huge communication problem.
I think there's been a huge communication problem since the jump with this woman.
Right. And I couldn't even believe it when I was reading, but like he basically faulted exactly what I talked about when we talked about her testimony previously, where he was saying that she was saying she's refusing to answer my questions, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not what was happening at all.
Yeah, she's basically saying, I don't know the answer to your question, which was the answer.
And she kept, and part of what happened, and I think it's just the language barrier, but she kept trying to ask him, the defense attorney, like, if I am not 100% sure, can I tell you what I think? And nobody would really answer that for her. And so she just said, well, then no, I don't know, because I'm not 100% sure. The judge said, ma'am, I just need you to answer the question. And so nobody was really giving her guidance to these very direct questions that she was asking. Now, granted, they're not supposed to, right? The attorney should, at that point in time, change up the question to address her concern, right? To your knowledge, or in, whatever she was saying, you've got to address it in the way you ask the question so she'll know whether to answer or not, right? And that wasn't happening. Like, none of that stuff was happening. In fact, they basically were arguing.
Right. And it got to the point that, like, she looks at him, and like, whether you believe her or not, sort of irrelevant for this part. She looks at him and basically says, if you're going to keep asking these questions this way, I'm just going to keep having to answer, I don't know.
Right. And he was saying that she was refusing to answer his questions.
Right. So at this point in the writing, in this motion that he's asked for a ruling on, which is the third quote unquote error, he's stating that the prosecutors have spent a year interviewing Juliana, and they should have known that she was going to give false testimony when she did not know the answer to something. I don't really see what he's talking about here. They definitely, John Carroll's interaction with Juliana Malgaliz was the definition of adversarial. And it was terrible. He did not seem to know what he was doing with her. There were lots of things they were having her read, but the prosecution's, their direct exam of her was not great either. And The response by the Commonwealth here is, absent any specific allegations, the Commonwealth is hard-pressed to effectively respond to this allegation. However, defense has been provided recordings of every interview conducted by the Commonwealth with Ms. Perez-Malgalese, and as such has had every opportunity to impeach her testimony with her prior recorded statements had they felt she was being inconsistent. So what's interesting about that is they're basically saying the defense did not object to anything they said was false. They got a lot of I don't knows, and if they're saying the I don't knows are the problem, that's not false testimony. That's just like kind of refusal to answer certain things the way the defense wanted them to.
Well, but if she truly didn't know, and I think part of the point was, I think she was being honest, that she like legit, she could have speculated, probably an informed speculation. Like, did you do this or did Brendan do this? She could have taken a wild guess and like, it was a 50-50 chance she was right. However, without somebody like going into more detail in their questions, she said, I don't know. I can't. And it was a lot of repetitive actions that like they both had done at certain, like, for example, did you send this text message? Well, she couldn't really remember all the text messages she had sent. She knew that either she sent it or Brendan sent it, but she didn't know right off the bat who it was. And it was that kind of thing that she was saying, I don't know to. And honestly, none of it mattered.
I don't think any of that stuff mattered. And I'm curious to see, I think this is coming back up in June, like June 5th or something like that. I think they're going to have a hearing on all of this. I'm interested to see how the judge rules on that. But you're saying like they went to bat for him or whatever, and I don't disagree with your statement, but I stand by this, even though it's clearly there's this motion to set aside. I did not understand how we got to a trial in this matter, like with him.
I understand.
Just his refusal to take the plea deal for life in prison? Is that what you think?
I understand that Brendan Banfield thought he was going to talk the jury into finding it was self-defense, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's just nothing charming about a potato, and he was kind of a potato in the stand.
It is the most this really shouldn't have gone to trial. He didn't, there was no denial of shooting Joseph Ryan. The idea was Joseph Ryan had stabbed Christine, and he had shot Joseph Ryan in self-defense and defense of others. So there wasn't even, like, it was either self-defense or it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of evidence that it wasn't self-defense. And then, of course, you've got his accomplice, I guess, testifying. And, even though she didn't know a lot of things, whether she knew which one of them sent the message, it didn't change the fact that one of them did send the message, right?
Right.
And so none of that testimony was game-changing. It might have slanted a little bit, but it seemed to me like it wasn't going to slant the way that the defense attorney wanted it to, because she went along with this, but she was not the mastermind behind this. There was no reason for this to be the mastermind. The biggest thing about her whole situation was, like, Christine told her to call 911, and she did, right?
Yeah.
And you have to keep that in mind. And I'm thinking, she did something bad, but like, this poor kid, she got in over her head. And I think she was genuinely shocked when Brendan killed Christine right in front of her.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even if you're in on the plot at that point, you're going to be shocked when it happens.
Well, right. And then, like, she shot Joseph Ryan as well. And that's another thing that tells me she wasn't as in the loop of the plan as Brendan Banfield thought she was. I just don't think she had a better understanding of what was going on.
Yeah, and to the point that, like, she had a really good plea deal early on. She
was going to be able to walk away if she would testify against him, and she wouldn't do it.
And so the outcome for Juliana Perez Malgaliz is she ends up pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter in October of 2024. She agrees that she's going to testify against Brendan Banfield for the prosecution. So the idea was, like, if she had taken this plea earlier, she was literally going to walk. But because she waited so long, because that's 18, 19 months after the February 2023 murder, because she waited so long, she just gets the prosecution coming in, and they say, after you go in and testify, we will recommend that you get time served, the time that you've done, and that will be our plea deal. We're making that deal for involuntary manslaughter, time served with you in exchange for your testimony against Brendan Banfield. The judge, however, did not stick to the plea deal and ended up sentencing Juliana Perez Malgaliz in February 2026, so about a week after the trial was over, to 10 years in prison. So that didn't even go her way.
Well, I think that there was some... I'm not sure exactly what happened. I don't know that she was surprised by that, especially after she testified.
Yeah. Anyways, my point is they made a motion to set aside the verdict, and I'm telling this to people in case you want to watch something potentially interesting. Would be a judge ruling on this motion to set aside the verdict, and why? Because they don't focus on the judge; they focus on the prosecution's case.
Well, and keep in mind, he was found guilty by a jury, right?
Correct.
And so everything, what has been brought to the attention in this motion to set aside the verdict are technicalities, right?
Yes.
And it's grasping at straws. This is exactly what a defense attorney is supposed to do, except maybe not. I don't know that they have as much merit as the defense attorney puts forth. They may. I did watch the whole trial, so I don't know that there's a lot that I wasn't privy to during the trial. I hope they show the hearings on television.
Yeah, I hope they put them on YouTube. I mean, ultimately,
that's television. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'm with you. Then we're just saying the same thing. I'm hoping to see this because I want to see how the sentencing goes. My gut says he just gets life in prison without parole, and there's no verdict set aside. But I wanted to bring him up in case that happened.
If the judge, they'll have their arguments, and the judge will rule on the verdict. I don't know that she'll rule right then, but hopefully so, because otherwise it's just going to be postponed again. Then he'll be. I think she's going to deny the motion, and then he will be sentenced, and then from there they would appeal if so desired, right?
Yeah, I think that this is sort of a delay tactic that probably should be. This can should be kicked on down the road.
I'm not exactly sure. I don't. Maybe they had to preserve it. Maybe if they didn't take it before the trial judge, they couldn't take it on. I'm not really sure.
I think these three things come up. I think you're right. I think ultimately, I can't remember if they preserved all of these three things during the trial, and I think this is an end run around doing that incorrectly.
Just doing it the way that they can at this point, right? I mean, it's not correct, but still, yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to see what happens. I don't think anything's going to happen. I think that the situation is what it is. I do not see Brendan Banfield having his conviction overturned. I don't see any injustice in what happened as far as in court and all. Do you?
This case is like, it's kind of running on autopilot. Like, unless the judge rules that there's some reason to have a more extensive hearing about the trial, like maybe they look at it and go, I think there's this other thing that we need to talk about. I doubt that's going to happen. It could.
Well, having watched the trial, I feel like he got a fair trial. He got up and like he's
just very upset that bad facts exist.
Well, I think that he thought it was going to go a different way. You can tell by the way, he testified and the testimony he gave. And, there's a certain extent where I don't even really like saying it out loud, but like sometimes you don't want to insult the jury, right? By thinking that they're going to believe what you're saying, because that could be insulting. I feel like that was sort of like his testimony was getting close to that. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, no, he's like, that guy thinks he's way more charming than he is. He is a potato. He is not a very smart dude. He's like operating as a member of the IRS with a gun and a badge, which should give everyone a lot of pause about the IRS having people with guns and badges if they're all like Brendan Banfield, or even half of them.
Well, and his testimony was also, a lot of it was not credible. He got on the stand and was like, yeah, we've been married for 10 years, but we had affairs all the time. And like Christine had affairs all the time. And, to me, I was thinking, I guess that was necessary for him to, continue his narrative. But I felt like jury wouldn't have taken kindly to it, even if it had been true, right? Unnecessary details that very sure he was lying. He made himself out to be like this smooth, I don't know, almost like a sort of a reserved playboy or something. And that just was not what was happening there at all, right?
Yeah.
He had fooled Juliana and he had fooled Christine, as far as I'm concerned, into thinking he was a good guy, and he was not.
Yeah, not even a little bit. I don't have a lot more on this one, but I'm encouraging people to watch or at least read about the sentencing hearing here, because I think it's going to be important as to the future of the appeals in this case.
Right. And this is the process. He has been convicted by a jury, and this is the defense's prerogative, and I'm happy to watch what plays out. And, there's an explanation for everything that occurs. And I do think he's going to maximize his appeals and everything else he can do, because
he has nothing else to do.
Well, he doesn't have anything else to do, but he genuinely probably believes that eventually somebody's going to buy his story, and that's not going to happen. Everybody sees right through it.
Yeah.
And I think if he had realized that everybody was going to see right through it, he never would have done this. So everybody's going to see through your story. Yeah. Don't do it.
Unfortunately, I think he's just that kind of potato. I think he's just not as smart as he thinks he is. And this is just how it's going to play out. He's just going to have to keep poking at it until he gets what he wants, which, sometimes people end up getting what they want. There's some kind of technicality that was in there or some piece of evidence that comes to light. I don't think this is that kind of case, though.
Yeah. And I watched the trial, and I would be shocked if somebody was able to, wrangle something that was worthy of that. I just don't see it happening. It was a very fair trial.
Well, I think it would have to be some of the pretrial nonsense that I won't drag you through all of it because I know you know it, but there was one prosecutor there that was really drunk that had an issue. Right,
yeah, we covered that.
Yeah, we talked about that here. And then there was this whole debacle that happened with some of the shuffling of the Fairfax police in their response to the technical analysis of the devices.
What it had to do was training
right.
a tech so a technology tech, I guess. I don't know what his official title was. He had been, I would say, not trained properly, but I guess he had been trained a certain way to indicate in reports, for example, when he was examining Christine Banfield's phone.
Right.
As opposed to saying, Christine Banfield's phone, he said Christine Banfield.
Right.
And so he didn't draw the distinction between the phone and the person. And I could tell from his testimony that, he won't ever do that again. But also, it was not done to be deceptive. It was not done to cause any problems. It was just the way he was referencing things. And never in a million years did he think that somebody would be like, oh, you said it was Christine Banfield. You couldn't have possibly just meant that it was her phone, right?
Yeah.
And so that caused a lot of confusion in the beginning, which I said when we talked about it, I was like, I can't wait to see. But ultimately, you can't ever prove who's behind a device unless there's other circumstances that show it. But essentially, the defense had taken the reports and said, oh no, we've got this, state's expert that has said it was Christine Banfield logging in, right? And it wasn't just the device, and it was semantics basically. But they also had, I don't know if it was his supervisor or the next guy came in and said he was not following best practices in the way that he wrote the report, and he disagreed with how it was. But this is not it wasn't even an evidentiary matter. It was just a cohesive training thing that hadn't occurred, right? When you're referencing an item, make sure you were talking about an item, not a person who owns the item, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little crazy, but most of those things could be explained away. And the defense attorneys had ample opportunity to address that during the trial. And again, I just don't see anything about what you've mentioned. It was a little hairy, but again, we're talking about, this is an example of a spoiled, I'm not really sure, a very confident man killing two people and thinking he was going to get away with it. And then his family paying an attorney have him get away with it, right?
Yeah, right.
And so that is what is happening here. That's why all these things were being picked apart, which I'm not saying that's not what should I mean, he is entitled to the very best defense any attorney can give him, okay? The evidence will overcome it in the end. But I think that it's a hard reality that it didn't. And I think that's why we're going to continue to see this.
I think this will be one of those things that he will write every Innocence Project and say all the things that he thinks he should be saying, and I think they'll all decline him. I think ultimately this guy does life in prison without parole, unless I'm missing something in terms of I just don't see any way he didn't do this.
Well, he hasn't even said he didn't do it. It's the motive that it was either self-defense or it was murder, right?
I'm talking about killing Christine Banfield. I'm okay.
Yeah, you're right. He did say he didn't do that.
I think you're correct that he will go down every rabbit hole he can think of because he just thinks that's the way life's supposed to be. But I don't personally see a way that this turns out working in his favor.
I don't either. I feel like they're going to try really hard, though. And you just don't normally see that from... He could not have convinced a public defender to go to trial, which you have a right to go to trial, right? If you're the accused, you have that right. This should not have gone to trial.
Oh, he definitely could have convinced a public defender to go to trial, I think. I think that, they would have let him roll those dice because they're his dice to roll, ultimately.
Well, maybe. I'm just thinking... John Carroll is getting, I think that's his name, right?
Oh, he's a paid attorney. Yeah,
well, Okay. But what I'm saying is, like, he would not be doing this stuff out of the goodness of his heart. He's being paid to be a defense attorney. There's no
Correct.
question. And
Correct.
there's a difference there, right? And well, I can see a difference. I don't know that anybody else sees it, but there are attorneys that will go to great lengths to try every single loophole, technicality, and that's what he's doing. It's just I don't think there's going to be one.
Yeah, it can be a bit of an ethical morass for public defenders when you're really not allowed to suborn perjury. That's a thing. So,
Well, sure, but if he never asked him, he's not.
I guess, yeah.
And in fact, like, I would say, I would be very surprised if he had ever asked. I feel like he doesn't know, and so if he does not know that he's lying under oath, he's not suborning perjury, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of that. It could very well be that Brendan Banfield believes what he's saying, right?
Well, then they need to, if he ever gets a new trial, they need to explore whatever mental defect caused that.
Right, but that's not going to change the outcome, right?
No,
I mean, he still did this and thought he is living in a state of shock that he did not get away with it. That Juliana turned on him, which, by the way, like, she didn't really turn on him. She just, decided.
Also got caught.
Well, I don't think Juliana would be doing this without him. I think that he was going to be doing this either with or without her, right?
Right.
Honestly, she didn't really need to be there to begin with, which
it's really a crime that he drug her down with him.
I mean, I wondered if he wasn't trying to get her to take the whole fall.
I think he was.
And that would make a lot of sense to, like, the whole situation, but that didn't really come out right the way it did.
No, I think she was his fail-safe. I can always blame the nanny. Hand the rocks to cradle style.
I think that I mean, he could have done that all by himself. She didn't need to be in the house. It was weird. I guess he wanted a witness. I think that's
where you landed, I think, when we talked about those. Yeah. Yeah,
he wanted a witness, and then she ended up shooting him because she didn't understand.
Yeah, I have two more things to talk about. You want to talk more about this one, or you want me to move on to one of the others?
No, you can move on. That's fine. I will be back around to this whenever. I think June 5th is the hearing.
Yeah, June 5th is the hearing on this one. So I think people are painting this like it's sensational. I did not feel like it was sensational. I felt like it was pretty inevitable. You and I talked about this case at length, moving on to like a different one. But I do think like there was some dramatic flair to how it was announced.
It came out of nowhere.
Yeah, the announcement came out of nowhere. The appeal had just been sitting with the state Supreme Court. You and I were coming at this from two different angles in terms of how we might get here. There's one piece of evidence that like we've never satisfied ourselves as to what's going on there.
And to be clear, the opinion says we didn't have to get to any of that.
Right. They're like they picked the first thing, and the first thing was the strongest thing. And for those of you who have not heard, the sentencing and convictions related to the murder of his wife and son for Alec Murdaugh were overturned this week and caused all kinds of drama. But ultimately, the reason they were overturned is because of jury interference by the clerk, Mary Rebecca Hill, who goes by Becky Hill. So Becky did it. Becky caused this. She basically is now into the South Carolina taxpayers for about $1 million for all of this.
I would say it's going to be way more than that.
Right. But ultimately, the South Carolina Supreme Court ruled that Alex Murdaugh gets a new trial. And the prosecution said not only do they want a new trial, but the death penalty's on the table. And, look, here's just a little hint of like advice for the prosecution of this case. Get to the bottom of whatever's going on with the DNA under Maggie's fingernails. Because if you don't get to the bottom of that, I don't think I can support what's going on here. But if they don't get the DNA sorted on this case, like, I think it's more they have to go after the conspiratorial idea. And that means like new investigative efforts. And I know they spent like $1 million on the trial and then on the appeal. I think I've read a number that was like it's $800,000 or something. Ultimately,
it's a lot of money.
Ultimately, the clerk is responsible for that. And I thought it was a little more minor what she did, but like, she full on tampered with this jury and then ended up pleading guilty to multiple charges.
So I watched the Murdaugh trial. I think you did too, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the clerk's behavior wasn't anything we could have seen from watching the trial, right? It's interesting because the clerk of court is an elected official, right?
Yep.
And so she's in an elected position that I feel like any elected office is one of that exists mostly because of public trust, right? And so people have taken it upon themselves, or they just don't know the difference. And, she's been elected to that position. And it is shocking what came out.
According to the testimony in the different cases, because there's multiple instances of her being accused of tampering with the jury.
I have no doubt that she has probably tampered with every jury that she's encountered.
I was about to say that.
Right.
But Becky Hill told the jury in this case to, quote unquote, watch him closely, watch his actions, and not to be fooled by the defense or the evidence they presented. They're going to say things that will try to confuse you. Don't let them confuse you or convince you or throw you off.
This was highly inappropriate. Again, going back to what I said previously, where an elected position is one where you're entrusted like directly from voters to be in that position. It's shocking that that would have ever occurred to her.
Right.
Okay. And her, I believe it's in the opinion from the post-trial hearing that somebody testified that she said that she was writing the book because she wanted to buy a lake house.
Correct.
Okay. It's just wrong. This is so wrong. It's so wrong.
What the Supreme Court of South Carolina decided was they were going to hold that Alec Murdaugh's right to a fair trial by an impartial jury had been violated and that the post-trial court erred in denying his motion for a new trial. Now, they point out in here, in some of the articles, that Becky Hill pleaded guilty to 4 charges, and they were obstruction of justice and perjury. I just want to say the jury tampering part of this has not really been dealt with. That's what she pleads to, but she ultimately pleads to those for showing a report of photographs that were sealed court exhibits and then lying about it. She got 2 counts of misconduct in office for apparently taking a bonus or multiple bonuses. I don't know what that was related to because I couldn't find the exact wording of what was happening there. But then another count of promoting a book that she had written about the trial through her public office. She has this whole statement that she reads to the court about the mistakes she made. But I think that they should tax her for this. Financially, she needs to be facing a big fine for the fact that the people of South Carolina now have to foot the bill for a brand new trial.
Obviously, she's a disgrace, right? I mean,
yes.
This is the crazy. To me, it's almost sort of what? Because you couldn't even imagine a clerk of court doing this. It's almost unbelievable, right? Except apparently it happened. She doesn't even seem to deny it, right? I think she was genuinely surprised when she learned. I would say that she should most definitely be fined at least the forfeiture of any profit she made off of that book.
That's sort of what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
A clerk of court should absolutely never use their elected position to profit. I'm not really sure why I have to say that out loud.
Yeah, and like the response on the internet to this case, first of all, it's been crazy since the beginning. But the response to this ruling, like, people don't seem to understand how fundamentally an egregious error this is.
I mean, I can kind of see that. I'm not sure because, deep down, like, we would be like, well, she shouldn't be doing that. But in some cases, like, this stuff happens and people get away with it, right? Because it's just not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal, right? It absolutely is, I would say, almost unheard of for a clerk of court in, small town South Carolina to be like, I need my lake house, I'm going to write this book. Right? And proceed to do so. And I haven't read the book. I would not support something like that. But it didn't seem, she had no qualms with it. Like, it wasn't even she didn't even hesitate.
Yeah, I have issues with her for like different reasons than that. I had issues with this case for different reasons, but I did notice that, like, I think one of the things that the defense put forward is interesting enough that it's gonna come back to bite the state if they don't understand it. Because like the state was immediately like, well, the death penalty's back on the table, and I was like, well, are you going to get like a fair trial towards the death penalty? Because like I come out against the death penalty even in cases like this. If I were to 100% believe he was guilty, I would still come out against the death penalty for Alec Murdaugh, because I think there's a lot more going on there, mental health wise and issues wise. I don't necessarily think he's like actually a huge addict. I think he's like seriously mentally ill. If he did it, that's kind of confirmation. But
also like his he just got granted a new trial because the clerk of court interfered with the jury.
Right.
It is ludicrous to say, well, we're going to try him again, and this time we're going to go for the death penalty. They need to slow their roll here. How about let's just get through without the clerk of court interfering?
Well, the other issue with this case, though, is so I said the DNA evidence bothered me. And I think it bothered you from the get-go. We talked extensively about that.
Should have nullified. It is unbelievable he was convicted with unknown, unrelated male DNA under Maggie Murdaugh's fingernails. That needs to be explained one way or the other. It is, well, I would say inconceivable, but at the same time, it happened, so maybe not so much. It is very weird for her to have male DNA under her fingernails that does not belong to Alec Murdaugh. We need to know whose DNA it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. But one of the things they didn't get you here, which would, in my opinion, preclude any kind of death penalty trial, aside from the fact that, like, you're going to have publicity problems. You're definitely going to have local publicity problems, like to the point that, like, you probably can't try them in the same place you did with the same people. But one of the other problems that is brought up in the appellate documents, but it's not ruled on by the South Carolina Supreme Court, and I firmly believe it would have been had it not been for this sort of fatal problem with, like, the whole trial's unfair because of the clerk tampering with things. But the financial crimes aspect of this, like bringing in all the financial crimes to this case, and then not connecting them in any way to a good motive. I think
it just made the trial a lot longer.
It made the trial super long, but I think the Supreme Court, even if they didn't have Becky Hill, ultimately would have ruled that caused it not to be a fair trial. So I think you have two major problems that you really should be addressing before you start with the death penalty on the table. I mean, I get it. I understand that, Alan Wilson thinks he can do a good job with all of this.
Don't you think that was a knee-jerk response, though? Like, that was the stupidest comment I've heard. It was
So
dumb.
if he hadn't have been like sending it out to all the news outlets before the ruling even really had spread and saying, he said, we're back to square one in this case. That means all our legal options are on the table, including the death penalty. Anytime you say that, it basically means you're terrible at your job.
Yeah.
That's like me. If I'm at McDonald's and I'm like, I'm going to spit in your food, but I have to tell you that through the drive-through microphone for some reason. That's basically the worst thing that could happen to me at McDonald's. And I don't eat McDonald's, by the way, or any fast food. But like, if I'm saying that to you, it's because I'm terrible at my job.
Well, right. And, they went through in the opinion, giving him a new trial. They talked about how the effect of what the clerk was doing. So the clerk of court was kind of like the jury wrangler, I guess you could say.
Correct.
They talked about she had given one.
Which, by the way, I've never seen that. I don't know why they do that there.
Well, the clerk would be the one responsible for sending out like jury notices, and so there are some, like, I'm sure it's by statute, and
I'm sure, yeah,
for the state that's. I think she may have been a little more heavy-handed than normal because she was writing a book and wanted to be an influence, right? She was trying to sway. She thought that him being found guilty would make for a more profitable book than him being found not guilty. But she gave rides to jurors, or at least one juror. I can't really remember. But she was doing a lot of very inappropriate things. And the jury, they have them labeled as, I think, like XYZ. And then there's a juror who is a number juror because it was the egg juror. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay. And so they talk about all that stuff. So all the allegations against the egg juror were pretty much made up. And the reason was it seemed like Becky Hill felt like she was going to be, she was going to cause a
problematic juror.
She was going to cause a hung jury. Well, then some of the other juries that speak, like, they actually took Becky Hill's position as clerk of court as a position of authority, and it swayed their opinion of the case. Like, they felt like, well, if the clerk of court thinks he's guilty, and so it mattered. And I'm not so sure without that influence that he would have been found guilty. Even based on...
You think just the hung jury part of that?
I'm not even sure it would have been hung. I'm not sure because, and again, that's exactly why he's got to have a new trial, because she weighed in and she was telling them things like, don't let his testimony fool you. And the jurors that were part of this were like, that made me think that everything he said was a lie. And I gave credence to what I was being told by the clerk, right? Yeah. And I don't see why anybody would have thought differently. Like, there was never a situation where any of that was going to be okay, right? And she, as an elected official, should have known to keep her mouth shut. Everybody could write books about things. Everybody could sway people, right, with their positions. You don't do it because it's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you can write the book after the fact. You can't, but I don't know if it's like wanting to know more information or wanting to be a part of it or wanting to have influenced something. All of those things you really can't do. Like, you can do the research, but you can't just stick your nose in the door of the jury deliberations and find out what's going on. And you certainly can't talk to them privately and tell them to disregard everything the defense is saying. I mean, if you're doing that, like, not only should you not be a clerk of court, but you should not work at a McDonald's. You shouldn't be you are displaying such a lack of critical thinking skills at that point, and it's such a lack of good decision making.
It's unbelievable almost. And again, I watched the trial, and obviously none of this stuff was what we saw, right? Granted, it's come back now a little bit where I think the media was sort of eyewitness to it, and they were baffled by her behavior. They witnessed like bits and pieces of what the jury experienced, and they weren't exactly sure what was going on. I think a lot of them just like chalked it up to like small town South Carolina. That's why it was happening. But so it didn't go completely unnoticed. I'm not sure anybody got the full picture until, I don't even know how they were able to put it all together. But I have a feeling it had to do with, there was another county clerk who had come in to assist.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I'm speculating here, but I think that clerk was probably key in bringing at least like you need to look into this to light, right?
Yeah.
Because if they would know how to do their job, right? And they were there just to assist, but they would have, if it was, a respectable county clerk, they would have picked up on it immediately, and they probably couldn't do anything to stop it because this happened like while the trial was occurring, right? This was like a 6-week trial.
Yeah.
It was a trial. I mean, and now they're going to have to go through this all over again because she weighed the scales. And don't get me wrong, like there was a lot to that case that I feel like it actually made sense that they felt some pressure from the clerk, because otherwise I couldn't figure out why they didn't care more about, especially the DNA issues, right?
Yeah.
So I remember talking about this, and at that time I didn't know that there had been interference. I didn't know that actually for a while. But to me, it actually makes sense because I thought it was odd that it could just be overlooked like that. Maybe it wasn't, maybe we don't even know that he would have been convicted without this interference. So I feel like it's not just a matter of going through the motion again to find him guilty again. I think that it actually deserves deliberation, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Without that influence. And I'm not saying that Alec Murdaugh is not guilty or guilty. I'm not saying anything about any of that. I'm talking about the process here, right? They should evaluate the evidence, which in the last trial included male DNA under Maggie Murdaugh's fingernails that did not belong to Alec Murdaugh nor anybody that Maggie Murdaugh was related to. And it was unidentified, and it remained that way. And that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's one of those things that and by the way, people, the opinion is like 30 some pages.
It's 27 pages.
27 pages. Okay. It's online. You should
It's worth a read. Definitely.
You should read it. Yes, you should read it. If nothing else, from the perspective that like, I thought about just setting aside an episode where you and I just read the opinion and talk about what those things mean. But I think people should do that on their own first, and we probably could do that.
Well, sure, because it gets into I thought it was explained very well. This is a infamous case, right?
Yeah.
And this is the Supreme Court of South Carolina. They took the time to lay it out, right?
Yeah, this is a unanimous decision.
Oh, yeah, 5-0, right?
This is all 5 justices agreeing with this. So it's not nothing. Like, this is not.
No question that her behavior would never have been acceptable, ever.
Correct.
It was insane. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the lower court that this stems from, because I think that they had to have had some sort of post-conviction hearing. But anyway, it was a situation where like there was no way they could deal with it. It had to go to the Supreme Court, right? Because a clerk of court interfering with the jury making the decision to convict is a violation of the defendant's right to a fair trial, right? It's a constitutional issue. And so it had to be decided at a different level. Like, it's not going to come out of the trial court, right?
Correct.
Or whoever was there. I'm pretty sure that the trial judge recused himself. I'm not really sure, but I know that the Supreme Court has ruled, they ruled unanimously, and Alec Murdaugh is going to get a new trial for the murders of Maggie and his son Paul. Now, it's interesting because the DNA is scientific evidence and could be the answer. It could also be the conclusion that Alec Murdaugh is guilty if they came up with a viable explanation. This is just in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's going to come back around. Now, he's in jail for his financial crimes regardless, right?
There's so much stuff he's in jail for that's sort of like unrelated directly, but the state thinks might be part of the motive.
Right. And, I can't say definitively that I think Alec Murdaugh is guilty. There's some evidence that suggests he might be. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense that somebody else would have done it, but that DNA has got to be explained. Well, and depending on the route they take in a new trial, there may be other things too.
Right. And they point that out in the decision. They point out that like some of the stuff that went on during the trial maybe needed some guidance from the Supreme Court as well, including like how they introduced evidence and whatnot. But like, here's when I knew, so I'm with you on the DNA thing. That's sort of what puts me down the path I'm on. And here's how I look at it. I can't decide if he did it, didn't do it, or maybe hired somebody to do it because of some of the wacky things that went on along the way. But the fact that I'm still asking those questions after watching the whole trial and looking at all the evidence, probably not a good thing.
Right. So I don't think that he hired anybody. I think that could have actually been found.
Potentially. I'm just saying, I guess maybe hired is the wrong word. I think of it as conspired with maybe somebody else that's dirty in his life that's already doing crimes. Because he's been found along the way to have connections to people that can get him drugs and help him move money. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on in his life where potentially he's held somebody to the feet to the fire and they help out.
Well, right. And so once he was convicted, and because this is not my fight, you know what I'm saying? I'm not, this isn't this huge case for me where I want to, Alec Murdaugh has every capability of getting himself justice, right? He was an attorney. But I felt like his drug addiction story, whatever excuse, I don't really know what to call it. I don't really believe that. And that was a big problem for me because that was the basis of his defense, essentially.
Yeah.
And so because I didn't believe it, it caused all kinds of issues for me. But maybe he's telling the truth. I don't know. There were a lot of things that, rubbed me the wrong way about him. But at the end of the day, I'm never going to get through that DNA. There should not be that DNA there. And somebody's got to explain it. I'm not even sure at this point they can. So without that, I can't say beyond a reasonable doubt that Alec Murdaugh did it. I'm not sure if the DNA didn't exist, I'd probably be leaning more towards he did do it. But why is that DNA there?
Well, that's what makes these second trial situations so interesting. I think that ultimately you and I decided that they throw the death penalty words into that statement because they're trying to force him to plea.
Absolutely. I think that there's no question they will try and force him to plea. I do not see that happening. I think that even if he was guilty, I don't know that he can reconcile that in his brain, especially if he really was on drugs, right?
Correct.
Because he's not on drugs now, I would imagine.
You can get drugs behind bars. It's more complicated. It's not as plain and clean as the prescription pill mills he was basically getting his either stolen or legitimate prescriptions from. But the other part about that with having a second trial is you get to see the state like completely tell a different story, and that's always fascinating to me.
Well, I don't see. I mean, I don't know how much they can vary here.
Well, if you have to lose the financial crimes, because they pretty plainly state in this opinion, you need to lose the financial crimes. So if you have to lose those, and you don't have the clerk helping you behind the scenes, what does that change?
I don't know that. I don't know that the clerk thought of her actions as helping the state, but I guess maybe, yeah. I mean, it lended towards a guilty verdict, right? So
it doesn't really matter if she thought they helped. She
was helping herself.
She can't overcome the burden of it appearing to be her tampering with the case. In fact, she got off lightly. She needs a couple charges of tampering in here.
Well, yeah, and see, we don't know all the ins and outs of what's happening there. And is she still in office? She can't possibly be in office.
No, she resigned. She resigned from Colleton County, and she took a deal I want to say December 2025. She took a deal, and like it sort of would have went under the radar with any other case the time that they released it, but like ultimately, it was not going to go under the radar with the amount of scrutiny and spotlight that this case is getting.
Oh yeah, no, this case is a huge case,
and it's probably going to come back around, because if they do another trial, I think we have to like cover at least our covering or trying to watch it coverage.
I agree, because this is it's a big deal.
I don't have a lot more on it today. I just think it's shocking. I mean, the truth is I could sit here and talk for 5 hours about it, but like some of my conversation after this gets to be a little less informed without me sitting and going through the document to explain my sources. Did you have a lot more on this or anything else you want to say on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about the opinion at some point if you want, but I'm not surprised that he's getting a new trial. I was not aware of what was going on behind the scenes when the trial was taking place, and I still thought he would eventually get a new trial for a variety of reasons. And so
that's the other thing I wanted to mention. This happened fast.
Everything about his case has happened fast.
Like it went to trial fast. We're already back around at a retrial now. That's a little unusual.
Well, but he also is sort of, I mean, I'm not going to say he's connected, but like they know how this system works, right?
Definitely.
He's an attorney, or he was an attorney. So he's also got really good defense attorneys.
Yeah.
Even if they're a little bit eccentric at times, I think, but they're fighting the good fight. And I think they actually believe that he's not guilty.
I don't know their state of mind. I haven't heard them address it, but they're obviously fighting the hell out of this case. Sure. I have one more thing. I know we're running kind of long, but I have one more thing. Do you have time for me to do one more?
Go for it.
So 2 of the cases that I've been really deep into in terms of death penalty cases, one was the Robertson case out of Texas. Do you remember that one, the chicken baby case?
Yeah. Yeah, he almost got put to death twice in a row, like consecutive years, right?
Right. So there was another one similar to that in Oklahoma that we covered, and that was Richard Glossop. Have you seen there was news?
Yes.
Okay. So Richard Glossop, for those of you who don't know, we covered this 2 years ago, I think, when we did a bunch of death penalty cases in the fall. Shortly before dawn, January 7th, 1997, there's a murder at this Best Budget Inn motel in Oklahoma City. A man named Justin Sneed is murdering Barry Van Treese, who is the owner of this motel. And in order to avoid the death penalty, Justin Sneed agrees to testify against the man named Richard Glossop, who is the manager of the motel. He ends up implicating him in a murder for hire scheme. So allegedly, Richard Glossop, this motel manager, paid Justin Sneed to kill the owner of the hotel. So Glossop is going to be convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of Barry Ventris. At the time of the murder, Justin Sneed was living in this like room in the motel, and he was engaging as a kind of informal handyman. He had like a meth problem and a history of violent crimes. Now, after Glossop goes to trial, he appeals on the concept that he received ineffective assistance of counsel because he's sentenced to death. The attorney didn't show the jury a video of the police where they were kind of, maybe the wrong word, but coercing or attempting to coerce Justin Sneed into making up this story about it being a murder for hire, which is so weird to me. But finally, in 2001, an appellate court agrees. They grant Richard Glossop a new trial. There were quite a few questions about Justin Sneed being reliable as a witness. Turns out over time, they're going to discover that like there's a lot of stuff that's not brought up about Justin Sneed. And again, at retrial, Glossop's attorney doesn't show the footage of this police interrogation. But the appeals court, by this point, they think it was strategic. The summer of 2022 comes along. Richard Glossop's attorneys get hold of several large boxes of the prosecutor's file. There's material in here that appears to be the state, like, sort of changing the story as they go with Justin Sneed. And the state ends up disclosing to Richard Glossop's counsel that they believe Justin Sneed told prosecutors he was prescribed lithium by a psychiatrist, which contradicts his testimony on this stand in the second trial, maybe. He stated he was not under the care of a psychiatrist and that he had only ever erroneously been prescribed lithium. So the attorneys file a new application for post-conviction relief, like raising issues about like not only a psychiatric treatment of a witness, but also suppression of this note with the lithium comment on it. We covered this in detail. So it was argued before the Supreme Court October 9th, 2024. And I think maybe Gorsuch had to recuse himself because he had been involved at a lower level. They order a new trial for Richard Glossop back in February of 2025, maybe. Anyways, there's news in this case for those of you who have not followed all of this. Richard Glossop is free. So he's out on bail. He basically got a $500,000 bond, which was paid for by Kim Kardashian. She paid $50,000 for him to be able to walk out. So even though he's almost been put to death multiple times, he walked out of jail Thursday this week for the first time since 1997. There was a judge's order that came setting bond. So they've had two trials. He's set up for a third trial. So this is after two trials, two fully independent investigations, a lot of hearings. Judge Natalie May ordered that the Oklahoma cannot deny bail to Richard Glossop, which is totally correct. He's maintained his innocence, said there was never a murder for hire plot. He was able to walk out of jail. I think all he has is a curfew and an electronic ankle monitor. But his legal case will go forward as to whether or not, like, somehow he hired Justin Sneed to murder Barry Ventris. And this is one of the reasons, like, it's difficult for me to get behind the death penalty, this type of case, because I've not seen anything along the way that makes me go, yeah, Richard Glossop definitely hired Justin Sneed to kill Barry Ventris for no reason.
Well, and that was one of the most bizarre things. We know that Justin Sneed killed him. Right.
And confessed to doing it.
And so the weirdest thing was, like, I mean, I know that Glossop had nothing to do with it.
Right.
And it seems like it was odd to add the detail for no reason, right?
It sounds like something a bipolar person that needs lithium would do.
Well, and I wondered, I wasn't sure if maybe investigators thought like he couldn't have pulled it off, but I'd always seen it as like a a meth binge or something to that effect, right? It was something stupid that happened. And, obviously it doesn't make any sense that Glossop would have paid Sneed to kill his boss and owner of the place that he worked, right? It never made sense.
Right. I am so excited that he got out. We've covered this case like in depth before, so I'm really this is just me announcing that he's out. I find it weird that Kim Kardashian paid his bail. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on this part.
I don't have any thought. I mean, good for whoever wanted to put it up. Good for them. He should have never been charged to begin with. And, he's going to go. I think they've taken the prosecutor's office has stated they're not going to seek the death penalty again.
Yeah, I believe that they're stating they're not going to seek the death penalty, and I think the new trial has some hearings coming up. I'm just glad this guy's getting a little taste of freedom right now.
Right, and I hope that the prosecutor's office can evaluate the evidence and make sure that this is really still a case that needs to be brought, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe just understanding Justin Sneed is solely responsible for it. It kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like, you don't have commiserate evil come together very often, right?
That is 100% true. And it definitely usually doesn't come together like this unless there's like pretty obvious reasoning. I never saw anything that indicated Glossop was involved in this. So
did Sneed eventually say that he had lied, or no?
I think Sneed's being a liar is never a question.
Okay.
I think I can't remember.
Except that it is because he was charged, right?
Well, but I'm saying, like, I think it's made obvious all along the way that like he's clearly lying.
So, do you think that in this situation, a different set of investigators, like this, none of this happens except?
This is one of those like zebras and horses situations.
Yeah,
like you have a murder, you take that guy, you charge him with the murder, you move on. He tried to lessen his sentence, which I don't fully understand, but I saw that there was a thing about this that caught my attention a very long time ago, and I think it was Sister Helen Prejean. You know what I'm talking about? Dead Men Walking?
Yeah.
I think that she had some letters with the family, or letters that Sneed wrote his family or something that pretty clearly outlined what had happened. But the problem was that, like, no one believed anything Sneed said. So even when he said he wasn't lying, they just assumed he was lying about not lying about lying. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Because at one point I remember reading that, like, that there were witnesses that were technically jailhouse snitches who said, Sneed laughs about lying about this all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that this case is like, I hate that this guy's been behind jail for 30 years, been behind bars or in jail for 30 years. I'm glad that this case finally, like, seems to be turning in a way that, like, maybe he gets out for part of it.
Hopefully he doesn't have to go back.
That's specifically what I'm saying.
This has been, there is enough generations of change out of prosecutors that somebody can do the right thing.
Correct. I don't have a lot more on this one. This one's going to come back up if it goes fully into a new trial. Oh, wow, we're coming up on 2 hours here. Did you have any more on this one?
No, I think we should probably give everybody a break. That was kind of a lot.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrattiCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.